Welcome to the Huff-N-Stuff podcast, where we talk about board games, card games, and anything in the tabletop hobby. We're so glad you joined us, because we have loads of great stuff from our contributors like Perception Check. So sit back, relax, and join our show. And here we go!
Well, it's no trick to make a lot of money. All you want is to make a lot of money.
Don't underestimate
the other guy's greed.
Episode 16, The Merchants of Phoenix. This is July 13th, 2014.
Welcome.
Steve and I are back for another episode. We will be talking about local merchants. Most notably, we're going to be talking about Imperial Outpost, our friendly local game store.
Yes.
And I thought it would be really interesting for this episode for us to take a little bit of time out from all of our fun stuff. Although I find it very fascinating about the business side of board games.
Me too.
Perception Check and off-topic electronic board games. That should be interesting because that is, I think, picking up speed.
It is, yeah.
So, without further ado, let's jump in.
1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me? Buy low, sell high. Fear, that's the other guy's problem.
Hey guys, now it's time to talk about what we've been playing recently.
And that's right, Elise. We're going to be now talking about what you've been playing.
Thursday, I played for about an hour with some folks that I hadn't met before.
Right.
At the our friendly local game store.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing a fairly new game. I believe it's a fairly new game. They just got it. It's called Super Fight.
Was that a Kickstarter?
You know, I'm not actually certain. I think it probably was, but I didn't look that up. I think there was a mention about Kickstarter in our discussions playing the game.
I got that impression it was.
It was a really fun card game. It plays very similar to, say, Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity. It's not, doesn't have that that crude factor. Cards Against Humanity is definitely made for adults. But Super Fight, it takes a whole new twist on that same basic system where you have a hand of cards and you're playing. The judge comes out, and what they're actually doing is pulling cards off the top of the deck that basically give you a villain. And it's a white deck is all your villain cards, and there's a black deck with all these attributes that maybe the villain's made of cheese. Well, that's fairly easy to fight. Or maybe they're armed with throwing stars and have a battleship. Or who knows, there's lots of different combinations that come out. So it's really kind of a silly game. We were being very loud. Laughing at the hilarious combinations, but it just goes around and you start out by placing one card that's your hero for that round, who you're trying to fight the villain with, and then you put one attribute down, and then it goes around once more, but you're playing an attribute onto the person's hero next to you, so trying to make their hero less heroic, and then the judge just determines based on the combination of cards who had the best matchup against the villain, and that's who wins that round. So it was a really interesting, simple mechanic, but absolutely hilarious.
It sounded like you guys were having a great time. I mean, every now and then I would look over and I would hear you guys cheering or whatever else, and everyone was giggling and smiling, so that's always a good sign.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and the hour or so that we played went by really quick. And we only did one. We didn't actually play to win. We didn't play for the points goals like the game is normally set up for. We just went around once the first time, and everybody got a chance to be judge, and then we went around again and added a couple of the expansion decks into the game the second time around.
Why don't you mention something about the graphics or artwork on it?
There really isn't much of anything. It's
just
very,
text.
very plain. Yeah, it's text, basically the same as Cards Against Humanity or Apples to Apples. At least Apples to Apples has some cartoony stuff. I guess they just have the logo on the back, but they've got some factoids and not factoids, but small facts about whatever the card is on Apples to Apples. But in this case, it's just the name of your hero, or maybe it says any 1990s TV hero or any TV character, or maybe it's just any comic book character, and you pick. So it allows for some flexibility that can be kind of creative given the situations.
I have a feeling that if you were to put some really good graphics with it, like if Fantasy Flight got it or something, that game would really sell. Well, of course, Fantasy Flight always does great with their marketing and such, but if you gave a little bit more graphics to it, I bet you that game would just fly off the shelves. Because it has some of the great nuts and bolts to it sounds like.
I think you're right. Games lack that, but then, Cards Against Humanity sells pretty well for the people that are looking for that type of game. Mm-hmm. And I think the people that will enjoy this will enjoy it regardless of any kind of graphics, because there is a little bit of ambiguity in some of the cards, so having graphics can be difficult for some of them. And there are so many cards. It's a very large deck. So, it would make it, it would definitely raise the price to have to hire artists to handle all of that.
Yeah. Now, what was the name of that again?
It's called Super Fight.
Super Fight. Okay. The game last Thursday that I played at our local friendly game store was 20 Express. Friend Chad pulled us out, and it looked very bingo-y and childish, but Chad has this knack for bringing out really great party games.
Yes, yes, he does.
He pulled it out. I was a little bit like, I don't know, just numbers. And we had a great time. It's a party game. The number of players is anywhere from 3 or more. You could have 100 people playing that game. That's the nice thing about that. I don't know many games that scale that well. You and I both played it, and basically what it is you have a bag of, they look like stone tiles, but I bet you they're like a real hard plastic or something.
Yeah, probably.
Tiles with the number 1 through 30 on them. The numbers 10 through 20, I think I'm remembering that right. There's 2 of those in the bag. All the other numbers, 1 through 20, 20 through 30, there's 1 of those. And there's a star in there. It's like a wild card. And basically you have to put down your numbers in sequential order on the piece of paper that they give you. You write it down once they pull from the bag. And after, I don't know, I think there was like 16 or 17 slots on that piece of paper that they give you. Once those 16 tiles are pulled, the game's over, and you calculate up who's got sequential, numbers. And it's not a very thinky game. It's not, there's not a lot of meat to it, but it's a nice little party filler game. And if you have a family, this is a great little game, especially for kids. I can see kids loving this.
I think so. Yeah, it's nice and simple, and it plays well. And it was, funny enough, it can play really quickly, so that's nice. You can get a few games in really quickly, and it's not complicated, requires only the simple knowledge of numbers and their order, not necessarily, there's no math involved.
I think I played it 4, maybe 5 times. The last couple times we were giggling, teasing each other and whatnot, and that's always cool. That's a good sign, just like the game you played before me.
I made some mistakes when the one round that I played.
Sure.
I ended up missing 2 numbers, and everyone's going, "How are you 2 numbers short?"
Yeah, I don't think you wrote down every tile that was announced.
I think I missed it. I was maybe deciding where I was putting a number and didn't hear the next one.
Our friend Chad also brought The Rise of Augustus. You and I both played it.
I don't know exactly how it's categorized.
Yeah, see, that's when we talked about last. I had played it with Chad, and remember we did it on the last episode. Maybe it was the episode before that. I had played it, and I was trying to describe it, and I didn't know how to.
Yeah,
so maybe you can solve that problem.
It's a difficult game to describe. You get 3 cards that you weigh out, and they're essentially locations within the Roman Empire, or they're people like senators or different government personnel. And essentially it goes around, and there's a bag with all these chits, big tiles that are really, really nice, solid cardboard. They're not flimsy pieces. And you pick a piece out, and everybody gets to put 1 pawn down on one of their 3 tiles that matches the symbol of the chit that came out of the bag. And it goes around, and then whenever a wild comes out, you can put anything down, because it's a wild. You can put a pawn down anywhere, and then all the tiles that have been out collect back up and go back in the bag. So it kind of resets the draw, and you're just trying to achieve certain objectives. There are 3 different colors of location tiles, purple, green, and orange, or pink, green, and orange, whatever. And you're the first to get 3 of each of those gets bonus points, and the first one to get 6 tiles gets 10 points, and the next person that got 5 gets 8 points, and it goes down bonus points that way. So it was a nice game, really quick. I enjoyed it, not complicated. And this is the thing lately that we've been talking about so much is I'm very impressed when a game can give you a lot of enjoyment without being overtly complex. And this is one of those games, and I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Rather simple mechanics, but it has a bit of meat to it as well.
Yeah.
I love Rome. I love history.
Me too.
And so I'm not so sure it carries a theme all that great, but it's got it enough where it sort of makes it a little more interesting, because without it, it would be not quite the same game. So
yeah, I understand. It doesn't really have... There's nothing that shouts Rome, shouts that era, but there are the locations and everything on the tiles. And maybe, I know my opinion on one of them I threw away because there are a few cards that let you kind of not necessarily attack other players, but you can hinder them by removing some pawns from their tiles or making them...
some definitely mean cards in there.
Yes. So. Yeah, there are some that make you move some objectives that they've already completed, and that was one of them I threw away because it was Britannia, and I said, I'm Roman, I don't need to be up in Britannia right now.
Yeah, it's a good game, and we bought it. Another game that we just recently bought was Island Siege, and this is by a relatively new game company called 8 Games. And this is a relatively new game, and I think it was at the end of 2013 that this came out, and I think they didn't even really start mass producing it till 2014 sometime.
Interesting.
And it kind of came out, there was a video of it through the Dice Tower's Origins review of it, and it came out there, and that's how we became aware of it. And it was in this sale that was online, so we decided to buy it because I'm always on the lookout for a game with a 2-player theme, so my wife and I can play together when we have weekends together. This game can be very mean. There are about 4 cards in it. Well, okay, let me back up. How the game works is basically you are on an island like Jamaica or some other Caribbean island, and your opponent is as well. Yep. And you build, you have an initial fort, and so you're building buildings underneath it, and it's kind of mostly a card game where you lay the cards down, and it comes with real metal coins in the game.
That is rare.
It is very rare, and I think the majority of the cost of that game is from these coins because it's made by a gaming company from New Zealand or Australia or something like this. I think they're called Campaign Coins. That produced it for them. And beautiful coins, very stylish, very beautiful, and there's always that nice cling, cling, cling that is when you have a metal coin in your game. I always love that. However, getting back to the game mechanics, basically you're building up, you have about, I think 9 colonists, and you're trying to get those colonists onto your forts, and then from the forts, they're helping build forts or whatever, and they're like wooden meeples. And then from that, then you move them down to the new building that you've just built. Like, let's say there's a governor's mansion, or there's, a warehouse or whatever, a tower, whatever. And those go behind the forts. Now, you can attack the other player that's building his fort and his island nation, and if you don't attack him, he's going to win the game pretty fast, because once you get your colonists all onto these new buildings, game's over.
Okay.
So it's in your best interest to go attack, and in fact, the rules encourage you to attack the other player. And then there's a little meeple wooden ship. And I think I'm going to steal one of your boats there, so I can put from your
Sails of Glory.
Sails of Glory, yeah. So we can use it for this game. Although I'm not sure how they would fit in the box. But in any case, you send that little meeple over to the fort. You place it on, and you attack. And you roll dice and all that. And there's no defensive die in this game. Now, there's about 4 overpowered cards in this game that really limit your opponent. And I've gone online to bgg.com to clarify some rules and such, and they said, nope, that's the way the game is. They are fairly overpowered, so it's in your best interest to go after those cards as fast as possible, to take them out, so that way you can continue your march on to victory.
Okay.
Overall, I'm totally not sure. Jen and I put in about 3 or 4 games of this already, and I'm still not sure about it. Part of me wants to hate it because those mean cards, the more time goes on and the older I get, the less I like aggression in games. I mean, I like a little bit, but boy, this is one of the reasons why I'm not sure I want to play Twilight Imperium every game, because it's a fairly mean game.
Yeah.
That's Island Siege. Is there anything else that you've been playing there, Steven?
Nothing in particular. A little bit of Forbidden Island I've played a few times the past week or so.
That's always a great game. It's a no-brainer as far as working and everything. The pieces are nice, but we already had an episode on that one.
Yes.
And we also played Las Vegas again. This was a game I had brought up in the last episode. I've been bringing this almost to every game meetup that I have nowadays because it's so easy to get out. People can just roll dice, and so it's a really easy game. Most people I know like the game. That's why I bring it every time. It's quick, easy to learn, easy to teach. So that's what we've been playing.
Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
I beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Hey guys! We present our newest magical contributor, Perception Check, where Eric talks about the world of RPG. Yep, that's right, RPGs.
This is Perception Check. My name is Eric. Today, I just wanted to briefly go over places you can actually go to get these RPG books, RPG resources, so you can run these games during your game night. You could always go into a Barnes & Noble. They have a pretty good selection of RPG books. What you're going to find there most of the time, I should say, at least the Barnes & Noble where I currently live, is newer editions. You're going to find the latest versions of D&D, the 5th edition books. You may find some 4th edition books, but I find there's only maybe 1 or 2, and they really stock up on the latest and greatest. They have a pretty wide selection of Pathfinder, because Pathfinder constantly is coming out with new books. Maybe 1 or 2 Shadowrun books, maybe a vampire, something Vampire Masquerade, Werewolf, stuff like that. You could go into something like a board game store. In some board game stores, you'll have a wide selection of RPG books. I know in the board game store I usually go to, they have a whole wall of RPG books that you can go through. Another great place is used bookstores. Used bookstores, they won't have the latest and greatest usually. So they'll have the advanced D&D, AD&D, 3.5. They'll have a very strange selection of older RPGs. Some you've never even heard of, some I've never even heard of. But that's great, because the great thing about going into a bookstore is you can actually flip through the pages. You can see the artwork, you can read about it. You can read about the setting, the characters, which leads me into my next part, which is online. Online, of course, you have a little site called Amazon that you can go on to, and if you have a Prime account, free shipping, because these books can be pretty heavy. If you order 3 D&D books, those are hardcover, pretty good-sized books, so that's quite a penny in shipping. Not to turn this into a commercial for Prime, but if you plan on buying lots of things off Amazon, it's definitely the way to go. Now, Amazon is great if you kind of know what you're looking for. I find there's other sites you can actually go to which offer smaller, more indie RPGs. Now I say indies, but some are actually pretty large publishers. For example, one of my favorites is a site called DriveThruRPG.com. DriveThruRPG.com is amazing. Now, you're not going to find your D&D there. I think they do have some Pathfinder books, but what's really great about DriveThruRPG.com is the smaller RPGs you'll find. For example, without DriveThruRPG, I wouldn't have found an RPG called After the Bomb. After the Bomb is a post-apocalyptic RPG where you're playing in the eastern United States after basically a nuclear war. And because of the fallout and genetic testing before the war, there are now mutant animals running amok all along in the eastern United States. For example, the game I played, I was a now when I say mutant, I don't mean I don't mean a bear with 6 legs. I mean a pistol dual-wielding mutant duck who is traveling the wasteland, trying to find the murderer of his pigeon wife, who happened to be a psychic. Stuff like that, which is great, because nothing better than trying to think of catchphrases for your badass duck with 2 guns. Another site I like is a site called RPG Now. RPG Now is really strictly indie. Now, it's not strictly indie. They have some books from major publishers, not major, but from larger publishers. But they have a lot of indie books, and indie RPGs have been gaining a lot of steam lately. Basically, just because they can do whatever they want. They have strange settings, strange rule sets. Indie RPGs usually aren't RPGs you'll play for an entire year unless the setting makes up for it, but usually they're really good for one-night-offs or even small campaigns. For example, the one that we're currently playing through is an RPG called A Dirty World. A Dirty World, it's basically a Raymond Chandler RPG. Raymond Chandler is famous for writing Nora books, and I love Nora. The one we're playing in right now, setting in a dirty world, it's post-World War II Berlin. There's U.S., Russian, and even remnants of the Nazi Party still around. In the game we're playing now, we're looking for a former Nazi scientist who has gone missing after the war, basically in hiding. And again, just really great settings for RPGs, and I can't recommend indie RPGs enough. There's so many strange indie RPGs you may find. Another great RPG I found recently through RPGnow.com is, I think it's fairly new, it's called The Strange. The setting is kind of hard to describe for The Strange. I would say that it's basically set in modern times. It's a modern RPG. However, in our modern day world, some people have discovered that you can actually travel to, I think of it like alternate dimensions, little small, I guess they call them pocket dimensions, and these dimensions will have their own reality, their own existence. However, they're usually kind of small. I think one of them is only like the size of a city block. But then there's people that live there, but they don't know that they're in this small kind of pocket universe. And you can travel there for adventure. You can raid things. You can find artifacts. But then there's also people who are going there to try to bring evil back into our world from these pocket dimensions. It's hard to describe, but when you're kind of reading and how to play it, it's really fun. I highly recommend The Strange if you can find it. Again, it's $20, I believe, on RPGnow.com. Definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Shadowrun, modern RPGs. Like it's very modern, but it has a very D&D kind of flavor to it. But these are just some of my suggestions. Again, online there's a limitless supply of information you can get about RPGs. There's a lot of free RPGs. A Dirty World, like I was describing earlier, is a free download. You can go on RPG Now, search for A Dirty World, and you can get the rule book, you can get the scenario for free. That's the great thing about indie RPGs. A lot of times they're made by people who just love RPGs and make their own. Online, there's so many resources you can use to basically look and research. You don't have to play D&D. You don't have to play Pathfinder. There's lots of RPGs out there. If you're not big into big campaigns and making character sheets and looking up stats and items, there's RPGs. There's games like Fiasco, which were featured on a episode of Tabletop, where very simply you have a pool of D6 dice. You have different scenarios. You roll the dice. You can assign different roles, different relationships to each other, and then you just play. You basically like a movie. You say, I'm going to have a scene with this person. You have a scene. Other people decide if it's going to turn out good for you or bad for you. And then with these collection of scenes, a narrative takes place that wasn't there before. And you're basically, you just created an RPG with bare bones information and just your imagination. So there's a lot out there. And again, all I can recommend is I love RPGs. Even if you think that you will not do good at RPGs, even if you can't get into different kind of settings like that, there's a setting for everything. There's an RPG with people set in high school, and it's just 90210 the RPG, basically. It's whatever you want. There's no shortage of settings out there. It takes very little time to find something that you feel that you and your group will definitely enjoy. Thanks for listening. Again, my name is Eric, and this has been Perception Check.
Two little mice fell in a bucket of cream. The first mouse quickly gave up and drowned. The second mouse wouldn't quit. He struggled so hard that eventually he churned that cream into butter and crawled out. Gentlemen, as of this moment, I am that second mouse.
And now it's time for our main topic.
That's right, Elise. Now we are on to our main topic. Now today we're not talking about video games. We're not talking about kids games or card games that older people play like canasta. We're talking about hobby board games and hobby card games and how they are sold, how all that kind of stuff. So brick and mortar is another term that they use in this industry.
Yep.
And there's often this discussion, and maybe you've seen the Dice Tower, maybe you haven't. There has been a few times on his podcast where Tom Vassell will talk about the brick and mortar store versus online competitors like Amazon or Cool Stuff Inc. or something. Personally, I use Amazon a lot, and part of that is because we live in Arizona, and most of my relatives and friends that I know and are all in California. So if I'm going to give folks presents for Christmas, birthdays, whatever, I'm going to be using Amazon, and my wife subscribes to that Amazon Prime, which gives you, not always, but for a good chunk of the products you buy, gives you free shipping.
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal because, yes, we pay for it, and it's kind of expensive in the initial funding that you pay for, but in the long run, it helps us because we're buying so many gifts, especially at Christmas, that we really depend on it. And it's nice to have a store, and Amazon's really good about getting us stuff really quickly, so it's not hard to wait for something. Whereas if you go to your friendly local gaming store, you're going to get it right away.
Yeah. I mean, for the Prime, it's like $80 or $90 a year for a subscription. So it's a big initial investment, but if you buy a lot of stuff, it cuts down because if you got to think every item you buy, you're generally paying about $4 or $5 maybe on shipping if it's a larger item, and that can add up very quickly if you're buying a lot of stuff. So I think that's why, and it's the fact that it's free 2-day shipping is really, really big.
Right, and I know that has pushed a lot of other competitors, whether it be your local game store or other online competitors, to have those things as well. Some of the benefits that the customers are receiving are becoming more and more competitive in getting things faster, better service, better customer service. They're trying to beat Amazon because Amazon's just pulling it in.
Yes.
And I have to say, I do like Amazon. There's no question about it. They've got almost everything under the sun. And I do feel guilty when I'm buying Amazon products because it's not supporting my local mom and pop shop. There was a big to-do about, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, about Walmart becoming really big and how the American public should not be supporting them, and how you probably saw it in 60 Minutes and these other media sources, and how the main part of that story, or the title of that, was it's putting mom and pop shops out of business. Walmarts are.
Essentially, the discussion is you'd get like a small town somewhere, and you'd get a Walmart that moves in, and suddenly everything is cheaper than all the local shops that have been supplying everything to that town. So everybody goes out of business in the town except for Walmart, because a lot of people will continue to try and support those smaller businesses, but most people are motivated by those very, very low prices. So there is that argument.
You could argue that the reason why they're doing so well in the smaller towns is because there's so many people from small towns that are not doing as well as they were back in the 30s and 1930s and 1940s. I mean, think about it. They're a huge chunk of America back in the day, back in the last century or two, who had family farms. They were working the land themselves, having a family, having somewhat of a life. And then up till, the mid-20th century, or maybe even later than that even, they're these giant farms. And so now it's these small towns which used to have farming community is now they have a lot of people either out of work, the business or the money flowing into some of these smaller towns is having some real problems financially. And when a Walmart does come in, it really exponentially hurts it even more. Like when we're in a big city here in Arizona, Phoenix, you can sort of kind of get around that. You don't necessarily, these smaller businesses can kind of compete. It's harder for them to compete in a small town.
There are more people within, say, an hour's drive of a given mom and pop shop, that those people that are willing to drive to support a mom and pop shop are closer and able to do so within a city versus a small town. Going from town to town, if there's hours between or what have you, is a bigger deal if you're trying to avoid the large box stores.
Right. Again, I will try to, getting back to our game store, I will try to get every now and then buy something from our local game store, which is Imperial Outpost, and do other little things for them. If they
the same.
If they want to close the store and there's an event, like it's getting really late, I try to leave right on time. Because in essence, when they're having event and having these special giveaways or whatever they're doing, that, not only am I there usually and trying to support them in that regards, but I'm also using their facilities and they're really getting not a lot from me being there, other than exposure. So this leads us somewhat of a nice segue into our next topic under this, which is our neighborhoods taking advantage. It does seem that way at times, but I'm wondering if it isn't actually not as bad as we think it is, because when I think about it, I feel really bad. I'm like, I should be spending more money there. I should be helping them out because it's a business after all.
Yeah. I do. I have a very small collection, and I understand that a lot of people, a lot of you guys that are at the shop on a regular basis have a much larger game collection than I do. Mm-hmm. And I understand that having such a large game collection can really eat at the wallet. Mm-hmm. So for me, having a small collection, I'm willing to spend more, full retail price for games. I don't tend to buy too many games not from the shop lately. I did buy one, but it was because the shop was going to have a hard time getting it. Mm-hmm. So I bought it online and saved maybe $10-15. But that's not really my motivation. I do really like supporting the shop. I kickstarted a project and didn't buy the main game through the Kickstarter because I wanted to buy the main game through the shop and make sure the shop got part of that. So that's, just a choice that I've been making. And I know for people that have large game collections, that's not easy to make on a regular basis.
Right. Well, as I said before, it's not just these small towns that are having a little bit of problem with, financially. I think everyone in the world right now is having a little bit of problem. And these folks that created and then made that bubble burst for the real estate market has really put a crimp in everyone's style because of the economy is now not quite as good as it used to be. So everyone's trying to save a buck. Everyone's trying to find a loophole because people want their things. They want their, and they still have to live. They still got to pay those bills. They still got to eat at the end of the day. So I understand why people do it.
Absolutely.
And now, the other question I have, there has been some discussion, and I had this talk once with Darren and some of the folks that work at Imperial Outpost. And there was this discussion that there were some game stores in Arizona that were not interested in coexisting with Imperial Outpost. And that's just sad. Stephen and I have often talked about the fact that this industry, we want it to grow. We, having my little black book grow and being able to call buddies and saying, hey, let's have a party. Who doesn't want a party?
Yeah.
And so the point of this whole thing is I don't get it when there's the non-coexisting attitudes between merchants.
Yeah.
If I had won the lottery, if I ever do in the future, I'm telling you all right now, I'm going to start a game store. It's going to have a little bakery. It's going to have a little coffee shop. And then you can go and game. You can buy those things. But I would be in direct talks and working with Imperial Outpost. They would be a partner with me. And I would say, I'm going to carry some things, you're going to carry some things, and then we're going to send people each way. If I don't have it, I'm calling Imperial Outpost and saying, do you guys have this?
Yeah.
Because in essence, okay, you're going to have your local people that are going to come no matter what. And for me to worry about those people in his zip code that are going to come to my zip code and shop rather than his is just silly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we need, as a hobby, and like I said, we've talked about this before. Stephen and I both, and I think Stephen agrees with me on this point, we all need to be working together to make this as fun as possible.
Absolutely.
You know, and this coexisting and the future, this is another segue into our next part of this conversation, is the future. The future of gaming and the future of the business of board gaming kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Not kind of, they do go hand in hand. Because like the last time, was it last podcast we had or the one before that where we were talking about how that this whole to grow and
the hobby has been building back up again. And
Right.
I know there are a lot of people that have always enjoyed it. But it is building back up. I've been realizing how many articles are in major news publications, Wired Magazine, NPR'd a short thing the other day about board gaming. A bunch of really big name magazines and newspapers have been doing articles on board gaming because it's resurging. And this is good. It's very, very good for everything. And we all want to see it continue that way. And I am of the opinion, that having these friendly local game stores, these mom and pop type shops where we can go and hang out and enjoy the hobby is very important to the hobby. Because I don't think it's the same just buying games from Amazon and online retailers and then just hanging out with your same group of friends doing it. Because it's all about, inviting new people and giving them a place that they can get into the hobby. And I don't think that's as easy without having these shops that people can locate in order to get into the hobby.
Right. I had said, in many ways, Cult of New is good because it helps fund new projects. It helps the hobby grow. This is no different. This whole discussion about,
I agree.
About merchandising and having the stores flourishing. Always something new. I mean, think about this. If no movies ever came out in the next 5-10 years, Hollywood industry wouldn't be what it is today. It would be nothing really. I mean, it would be just some mom and pop shop people doing it.
Imagine if all movies were sold straight to DVD and there were no movie theaters.
Yeah, that would be not
I
cool.
don't think you can imagine that. But
No.
I mean, it's not quite the same
Because people need
for these shops because there aren't as many, it's not as big. But
Yeah.
I mean, for us in the hobby, that would be the same kind of feeling.
Right.
Like I would not be in this hobby right now had I not heard online, hey, go find your friendly local game store.
That you
and
hit it
meet
on the
people.
head. Yeah.
And I went to my friendly local game store and now love the hobby. But just going online to buy board games, I'd be trying to convince my same group of friends who didn't play board games in the first place to try and play board games, and I'd have no reference to say, hey, I played this the other night and it's awesome, you got to come over and play.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
Yep, I couldn't say it any better myself.
Oh, I get it. You want to be entertained some more, do you? Okay, well, let's just see what we can do here. Let's, I don't know, let's go with an off-topic.
That's right. Now we are on to our off-topic, and Stephen and I were talking about this recently, and I said, I'm not sure what kind of off-topic to do, and Stephen was like, well, why don't we do it on electronic versions of board games, whether they be on the computer or iOS versions. Let's talk about that. So I said, okay. At first, when I started thinking about this, I was a little indifferent. I play board games. I don't really play a whole lot of iOS products, or I don't really have a lot of them. So it's a little different. But let's jump in here. Stephen, what is your initial thoughts about the electronic world of board games?
Well, it's definitely a different thing. I know we talk about all the time about the reason we love this hobby so much is the whole social aspect to it.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a common argument when people say, oh, I play video games, things like that. Let's face it, there's a stereotype there about people being antisocial. Well, I don't necessarily find as much enjoyment with the online games because it's not social. Now, there are ways you can make it social. I was kind of giving this some thought. People were talking, I was looking up some blog posts and looking on some forum posts on BoardGameGeek.com, things like that, where people were talking hey, I've got friends that live in another state, and they love board gaming, but since we've moved apart, we haven't had the same kind of times. So they were talking about ways to enjoy those games online together. And I was thinking, like, if you set up a session for an online game, and then you do like a video chat session at the same time, like run Gmail, like a Gmail chat, with everybody on like a video chat while you're playing, like that almost immediately solves the whole social aspect. It's not exactly the same, but it's close, and I think that you don't lose a whole lot in that sense. You're not dealing with the physical game, but it's a lot cheaper, and I know we'll talk about that here. But I don't play a lot of iOS games. I don't own a lot of Apple products. I do have an iPad, but I use it sparingly, I guess.
Okay, well, let me just jump in here real quick, because what you're talking about, let's sort of define what iOS is, because when I have said iOS to a few people, not a lot, but a few people like my wife, she was like, well, what's iOS? First of all, iOS is an Apple coined phrase as mobile operating system for their iProducts, like the iPad or the iPhone, those kind of things. Let me say, when some of these products started coming out, it was before Apple got involved, or before there was these types of devices.
Yeah.
Some of the first implementations was electronic versions of them on Xbox and Wii. Like, I know back when we first got the Wii, I was looking for games that we could play with the family, and this was before I was into the hobby board gaming or the designer board gaming.
Yeah.
I had bought for the Wii, we recently got, and I got one where it had a bundled thing that had Sorry in it. It had, those types of traditional board games all on one disc, play a number of different things. Mr. Potato Head was in there too. I'm not sure I want to play Mr. Potato Head, but it had it in there, and that was one of the first ones that started implementing that in an electronic way, because let's face it, most of the newer generations don't really play board games. I think there's a lot of, they're all very electronic culture, these young people these days. And see, when I grew up, there was no computers and all this. I know I'm dating myself here, but we had, on a rainy day in Southern California, I played board games.
Yeah.
Or we built models, plastic models or whatever, we didn't have computers. We didn't have electronics.
My family growing up, I'm younger, but my family growing up didn't get into the whole computer craze as soon as a lot of other people did. I know a lot of my friends had computers and internet well before we did.
Sure.
So we did play a lot of board games, a lot of Life and Monopoly and those kinds of games over summer break and stuff like that between
that's good.
The school year. So yeah. And that it had been years before, since then, that I'd played any real board games.
And I guarantee you guys are a tighter family because of those things, because of those times that you spent playing board games and whatnot. And that's a whole other topic for another day.
Yes.
but I guarantee you that you guys are tighter because of those times.
Yep.
Now, let's just quickly here, let's just go over a few things with the iOS. Apple is very smart. They've always been very savvy with their marketing and their products.
Yeah.
Of course, they make a good product to begin with, but they were smart for trying to get a lot of the board gaming industry and entertainment, whatever, onto their devices. They're very smart. And one of my beefs with Apple is that they're very exclusive. They're not inclusive at all. They're not sitting there going, well, gee, Microsoft or whoever else, here's some of these things. And first of all, iOS products, Apple products, are very expensive. They're not at all like PC versions of whatever else, or the Android or whatever. It's very pricey, and in order for me to be playing some of these iOS games, if I wanted to, I would have had to buy a pricey device so that I could run them. That's one thing that is a little annoying to me. It's something for you all to think about. Why is this? But another thing that iOS games, and we're talking primarily about Apple, is why are they so cheap? They seem to be very inexpensive.
Frankly, I don't have an idea. I would assume that it's the less time is required for developing these games.
Yes.
They're not creating a new idea. Everything exists Basically, all they have to do is create a digital version of the existing board and pieces and what have you. I don't know much about programming, so I'll say some fairly simple programming.
Yeah.
Relatively simple to other video games, at least, in order to create these functioning board games.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I know that's one of these things as far as like games when they came out for Xbox and things like that. These are the big name Hasbro, Mattel type brands of board games. Now, was that just a money grab? You know, did they really expect them to do very well? And I don't think initially for Apple products they did. I think it's been fairly recent that they've become so common. I mean, Apple has like Small World and Catan, and Memoir 44 is a free-to-play game I was seeing. So there's a lot of very, very good board games that are available on Apple products. Not so much on Android yet, which is the alternate operating system here for phones, you know. So I'm not sure why it's so exclusive.
Well, and I think that one of the reasons why they are so inexpensive is exactly what you said. I think it's because all they're really doing is writing code to make that board game come alive on. Now, again, I know I'm simplifying the issue here by saying all they got to do is write code, because code is not easy. I'm sure those guys that work on those products would be like, how dare you say that? It's a lot of work. So I'm sure there's a lot of work there.
We're not saying that, folks.
But it's not the same level as if you were to come up with something completely new and some completely unique.
I mean, it's years of work to design a really good board game.
Sure, exactly. One of the things that kind of makes me wonder is, not me per se, but every time you turn on a podcast out there, they're always talking about some kind of iOS game or a board game put on an iPad device. Generally, it's not. The majority of these iOS games, or quote-unquote iOS games, are games that are for the iPad. And I keep hearing people, they're going traveling or something, and they break these out and they're playing it at the airport or whatever. And this is all that is going on right now. This is the big thing. And my take on that is, why are they so enthralled with these? Maybe you have an idea with this.
Well, there's a lot of discussions everywhere you look about how often people are on their electronic devices and things like that. They're always wanting to be doing something. Who knows if it's just a boredom thing? I mean, some people probably really like these games. Maybe they can't get enough. Maybe some of these games or people that play these games are the type that really love to develop their strategies for these games, and maybe it's just a good practice environment for them. I'm not that serious about it, so I surely wouldn't be improving my strategies for board gaming. I kind of play as I go. I'm not exactly certain why it is so popular, but it's still good. I don't think it's a draw from the hobby. These people that play these games probably own or enjoy the physical versions as it is. I don't think that you possibly could use these as a replacement. Very few of these apps, from what I've seen, these online versions of games, are what they call pass and play in the iPad world, the iOS world, where you can, on the same system, pass the same iPad around to multiple people and play together all on one device. Usually they're all separate individual devices. People are playing across the internet with a lot of times strangers. So I don't know.
Now, I know that if you're talking about games and versus live games, I mean, there is a little bit of conflict going on there, and I've heard some debates going back and forth, whether they're good, whether they're bad. I mean, let's just face it right now. If you're traveling, they're awesome.
Yes.
No question about it. Or if you are at work and you're there for like lots of overtime and you're there for long hours and you want to break out your tablet or your iPad and play, get in a game while you're eating. It works great there too, because what are you going to do? Break out a board game and play by yourself? It'd be a really tough deal to do that. So it definitely has a place. It has gained a foothold in the industry. And in some ways you could argue that these iOS games in many ways have made people better gamers. Like they've learned the rules a little bit better.
I think so.
The reps in a game. They always say, well, because I've heard that people ask questions of these professional reviewers, and they'll say, how many times would you consider playing a game before you can review it properly? And they'll say, oh, well, I'll do it like 3, maybe 4 times, kind of more or less, and sometimes more if they really like the game, right?
Yeah.
Well, this definitely helps that situation because then you can put in much more time with it. My wife last Christmas bought a tablet, and I put on there Mr. Jack. I paid, I think it was like $3 or $4 for it.
Yeah.
The Pocket Edition. And I know this game really well.
I noticed some of the apps have tutorials and things like that.
Yeah, their
for the
tutorials
games.
are great.
So it's
usually.
really nice for people to learn a game.
Sure.
Like you were just saying, because it is the way that these game developers have created tutorials is oftentimes much better than someone actually trying to teach the game. A lot of times I'm sure they have someone really good at teaching the game that shows them how to make the proper steps to teach, I'm sure. But having that tutorial is probably easier than trying to read the directions and learn the game on your own.
Mm-hmm. Let's close with this. Where's the future for this kind of phenomena, I even call it, because it's not really a whole industry. If it was an industry, they'd be pulling in lots of money. But as it is now, I mean, the average price for an app these days is, I think, about $3 average price. Some on the high side like $6, and some on the low side for about $1.
Yeah.
It's about $3 is the average price. And you often will see these board games on sites like Yucata, something. I can't
Board
remember.
Game Arena?
Yeah, Board Game Arena. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's these two sites, and it's free to play on there. You just have to register. Now, why would they do that? Why would a board game do that?
I'm not exactly sure, but I did look up. I did check out these sites like Board Game Arena.
Right.
There is I checked the frequently asked questions on their website, and it does state on their website that all the games there are legally licensed. So it's not like under the table type thing,
Sure.
like someone just created an online version of these games. These are approved, licensed digital versions
by the manufacturer.
By the manufacturers, the people that own those copyrights. So it must be the advertisement revenue that they bring in.
That's exactly
if
what
there's
I think.
Advertisements on the website. I know Board Game Arena has some kind of subscription that you can do to support their website and such.
Yep.
And I'm sure that they use those funds to pay for these licenses and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm fine with that if the board game creators are fine with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure nobody's knocking off these games necessarily.
No, and I think that in the long run is that this is also like a marketing tool. You could argue that all these iOS things, yes, they're cheap. In many cases, they're free on these PC sites, or I guess you could play them by Mac online. But they're all relatively cheap, and you would think it would be like horrible as a business model. But just like when you go to your brick and mortar store, because we've been talking about this today, that when you go to play games there, that's in essence a marketing tool. That you're going there so that they can gain more customers.
Well, I know some people, when they prepare for cons, they send a letter to the company and say, hey, I want to set up your game at a convention. And some of these companies are so good, they send them all sorts of stuff, and they're like, here, give this away, or tell people about this, and here you go, here's the whole kit. So yeah, I mean, it's
a part of the business model.
Yeah, it's another way for them to market.
Yeah.
And it's good for them.
Yeah. So, thank you for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed our show. Stay cool out there. It's summertime. While we're recording this, it's about, I think, 105 outside?
It's hot today.
Yeah. It's like 106 or something. Do us a favor. Before you take off, please like us on YouTube.
Share and subscribe.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Have a great day or night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the Huff-N-Stuff podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and hope you can tune in next time. Huff-N-Stuff is brought to you by Southwestern Valley Gaming Group at swvalleyggaminggroup.webs.com. You can visit us on our webpage at huffnstuffpodcast.webs.com. That is HUFFNSTUFF podcast.webs.com. We love to hear from you, so leave us questions, feedback, or just say hi. As always, keep on smiling and game on.